Welcome to the Craft a Professional Resume and Cover Letter workshop here at the Annenberg Digital Lounge. My name's Michaela. If you haven't taken a workshop with me before, I am the Digital Lounge coordinator. So I work up at the front desk there Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I'm here for all of your web development, Adobe Creative Cloud support. And now that we're doing this workshop, also if you ever need some resume or cover letter support, I'm here for you as well. I am a USC alum. I did my undergrad in film and television production at the School of Cinematic Arts. I graduated in 2023. And I've been in this job for about a year. Love all these workshops I'm teaching, and I'm happy to get to teach this workshop for you guys because, especially if you're graduating, maybe looking into internships, we're sort of at a spot where your cover letter and resume, you have to be very calculated and smart with how you go about it. So we're going to get into that together today. Due to high volume of applicants in lots of jobs across all markets, recruiters often read resumes in three stages: skimming, scanning, and studying. So the skim of your resume will take maybe a second. Scanning takes a few seconds, whereas if they choose to then study your resume, that could take a minute plus. They're really getting into the meat of it. So what's really important in today's day and age is to stand out whenever you're making your resume. They also tend to scan resumes in these F and Z motions. So kind of starting at the top, reading across, and then going down and reading across for looking for keywords, looking for anything bolded, different roles you've had, etc. So it's important that you make your resume stand out so that it passes these sort of methods of review. Now, something that's very important now is what's called ATS, Applicant Tracking System. Has anyone heard of this before? So this is something that's been implemented in the past few years across lots of different companies, especially larger companies that get high volumes of applications, use applicant tracking systems in order to file their applications, and then also they use it to rank the applications. There's some AI involved, but there is still human interaction with these resumes. It just helps recruiters and hiring managers to make things a little more organized and to weed out resumes that automatically off the jump aren't going to be a good fit for the company. So, like I said, most large companies use an ATS to manage their large volume of applications. Not all companies do this. When I applied for the job here at the Digital Lounge, I was referred by someone I knew, and so I had a direct connection to our manager, and I didn't have to go through all this. But a lot of jobs have these. And if you do not meet certain minimum requirements, the ATS will automatically filter you out. So even if you write a fantastic cover letter, even if you think you're tailoring your resume to fit a company, if you're not meeting those minimum requirements that they set, it's just going to be an automatic pass from the system. The ATS follows this sort of timeline where the job is created, it's posted on job boards and social media and etc. People will apply, and then all those applications are received, screened, and ranked. That data is stored, interviews are conducted, and then the best candidate is hired. So what we're going to talk about today is steps you can take to make sure that when your application is received and screened, it ranks higher amongst other applications. Because the higher you rank, the better chance you have of a real human really looking at your resume and considering everything you have to offer. So we want to do a couple of things that the ATS system likes so that you can get ranked higher. So, a couple of ATS do's and don'ts. I personally love a creative, fun resume. However, unfortunately, the ATS systems have a hard time reading at resumes that have complicated styling, multi-columns, etc. So, what you're not going to want to do is use complicated styling, add pictures, or use text box because the ATS might have trouble reading those things. So what you do want to do is you want to maintain simple format. One column is recommended. You want to tailor each cover letter and resume for the job you're applying for. I know it takes a lot of work to do this for every job, but as we're going to get into a little bit later, there are AI tools that you can use to streamline this process so it doesn't have to be such a headache. But you really want to tailor it to the job because what we're going to get into is this concept of keywords. ATS systems have keywords that are in the job posting that employers are looking for. And if your resume doesn't have those keywords, it's automatically going to get filtered out. So every time you're applying for a job, you want to go through and like make a list of the major keywords in there so that you make sure your resume and cover letter are hitting all those marks. You want to use standard headings so that it can to improve readability for that system. List in reverse chronological order. When it comes to your experience, you want to do your most recent job first and then go down the line from there. And you also want to use standard fonts. A lot of these things are to help with the readability for the ATS system. A good hack, if you want to check to see if your resume is going to be easily read by the ATS, is just Command A or Control A, copy your entire resume, paste it in like a notes app or something, and then go through and see how it reads. Because if you have two columns and you try to do that, it's going to look funky once you paste it. Because basically that's what the ATS is doing is it's taking all your information and then like coding it through its software. So that's why I recommend one column resumes because if you copy and paste that, it's going to read exactly how it is in your resume. Things like Canva have a lot of great templates and resumes, and that's what I was using to make my resume for a while. But in order to get through the ATS system, it's honestly best if you use like a Google Doc or a Word doc to type out all your information just to ensure that it's going to be able to be read by the ATS. And this goes for like the standard fonts as well. It might get confused by certain fonts. And also for the format of your resume, it is best to submit resumes as PDFs. Word documents may be allowed, but it can get a little bit trickier. So I would say best practice would be to submit as a PDF so that the ATS can read it. Definitely avoid like a pages file if you have Mac or something like that. You want it to be a format that is easily read, easily downloaded. Any questions so far about ATS? Okay. So, we're going to talk a little bit about keywords that you want to look for in the job posting. You can do this by one tip, something that a lot of people do is they will put the job posting in an AI chatbot like ChatGPT and say, "Hey, tell me all the keywords for this job posting," which you can totally do, and that's fine. But I personally think it is really useful to go through the job posting yourself so that you have a very clear understanding of what it is they're looking for and define these keywords for yourself. You can always use ChatGPT to check your work to see if there's any keywords that you're missing that they maybe pick up on that you like, but I think that it is a good exercise and helps you understand the job better if you go through yourself. So you want to look for these four types of keywords. You want to look for job duties, software and equipment, industry terminology, and professional traits and behaviors. These are all things that you want to be integrating into your resumes and cover letters so that the ATS sees these keywords, flags it as, oh, this person has done a job like this before. This person has experience with the software and equipment that we need them to have experience in. They know the industry terminology and they have the professional traits and behaviors that we value at our company. So that's basically the categories. So now what I would like for us to do is we're going to go through the job posting for my job when I applied to it. And I want to see if we can come up with some of the important keywords that I would use in my resume if I was applying for this job again. So the role is Digital Lounge Coordinator. I'm just going to read through this first, and then we can talk about any keywords that jump out at you guys. So, the USC Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism is searching for an enthusiastic and organized computer consultant to join our dynamic and collaborative Annenberg Digital Lounge team. The Digital Lounge Coordinator will support the Digital Lounge priorities through the management and coordination of a wide range of student and faculty multimedia support services. These services include, but are not limited to, help desk support, workshops, event services portfolio, Adobe certification course programming, web services, and technology curriculum development. Coordinators expected to work on campus from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday with flexibility for evening shifts and weekends. Okay, so just in this, are there any keywords that jump out at you guys, things that I might want to include in my resume and cover letter?
Maybe the computer consultant.
Sure. So that's the broad job title. Anything else?
Management club.
Yeah. Anything else?
Multimedia science.
Yes. Anything else?
Like enthusiastic and organized.
Yeah. And it's going to get into detail some more of this stuff in other parts of the job posting, so we'll move on, but that's a good list to start with. Okay. So next up, it gets into the responsibilities, and there's a lot here, but I'll just read through it really quick. Maintain and shepherd a positive, organized, and professional customer service-oriented environment. Collaborate with staff and student team to communicate and promote programming through newsletters, social media, and the Annenberg Digital Lounge website. Provide software support for students, faculty, and staff. Oversee and run workshops, events, and certification courses, including sign-in, equipment setup, capturing photos, breakdown, etc. Maintain and update procedures and workflows for help desk, workshops, and certification programming. Coordinate and schedule workshops, events, and Adobe certification courses with internal resources and third-party vendors. Hire, supervise, and schedule a team of student worker media support specialists for the help desk space. Ensure the lounge is open and closed. Ensure workshop service portfolio covers all areas of focus: creative media, web development, and data analytics. Measure programming success through data collection and reports. Assist with setup and proctoring of certification exams. Coordinate project with IT team. Coordinate web admin projects and ticket with outside vendors. Assist with projects on a need-by basis, including administrative support, note-taking, preparing meeting materials, research, budget, etc. Track and maintain invoices, billing, timesheets, and budgets. Conduct research on new and emerging technologies, make recommendations, and generate reports as needed. So that's a lot. Maybe take a second to read over it again, but is anything jumping out at you guys here? I'll say the first one that jumps out at me is customer service oriented environment. Customer service seems like a thing that's really important in this job. So that's something I definitely want to talk about. Anything else?
Maybe like the Adobe certification and then the like areas of focus and how ensure workshop service portfolio covers all areas of focus.
Oh yeah, yes. So we can generalize the Adobe stuff to just Adobe Creative Cloud. I know that that's something that this job handles a lot of, so I want to make sure I mention that as a skill and talk about my experience with that. And then, yes, like you said, creative media, web development, and web data analytics. Also, data collection is something that's important in this job. So if I have that experience, it would be good to mention that. Noticing a lot that has to do with project coordination and management. And then also event, similar to project, event coordination and management. Okay. Required knowledge and skills. Experience with Adobe Creative Cloud, which we added there. Experience with WordPress, which we can add. These are some of those hard skills. Which, by the way, reminds me, do you guys know the difference between hard and soft skills? Anybody want to take a stab at explaining?
I think hard skills are technical skills and for soft skills is something like communication, collaboration.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, those soft skills are sort of more aligned with maybe personality traits and like general ways in which you can contribute to the team, like you said, like communication, leadership, project management, those sort of things. Whereas the hard skills are the softwares, the tools. Adobe Creative Cloud would be a hard skill. WordPress would be a hard skill. Um, Data collection and analysis would be a hard skill. Things that like actually require training. We'll get into it a little bit later, but when you're finding these keywords, sometimes it can be helpful to sort of break them up into those categories, the skills, and then within that, hard skills and soft skills, and breaking it up into that can be helpful. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Excellent client-facing, written, and oral communication skills, including the ability to interact effectively and maintain relationships with a diverse population of students, staff, faculty, and third-party vendors. So I believe we already, or did we not? Communication skills is a big one. Solid organizational skills, including attention to detail and ability to multitask. So there's a couple in there that you could draw from. You could say organization. Oh, we already have that. You could say attention to detail, multitasking, strong analytical skills. That kind of goes, we talk about like the data collection analysis, we can keep that there. Be receptive to critical feedback. Probably not something you would necessarily mention in your resume, but could be something if you wanted to. Ability to work independently, proven work as a project administrator and or manager in an education and or IT field. So IT and education could be important. Strong working knowledge and familiarity with productivity tools, including Microsoft Office, Google Drive, and or OneDrive, and project management tools like Jira and Asana. So all of those we could list as different ones. So Microsoft Office, OneDrive, Google Drive, and then Jira and Asana. Ability to explain technical concepts to non-technical people in a positive, patient, and friendly manner. Ability to work efficiently on simultaneous projects and manage time. I think we have multitasking in there. We could say time management. Ability to troubleshoot and quickly learn and support new software and solutions. Flexibility in work scheduling as required, may include some evenings and weekends. Comfortability working with Macs, PCs, and mobile devices in a platform agnostic, innovative, bring your own device environment. Okay, I think that's good. The list on this. And now you'll get into some bonus skills. A lot of job postings will have this, things that are they would love for you to have but aren't required. But if you do have those skills, they would really boost your resume. So for this job, experience with program development, training, and or curriculum development, teaching experience, PMP certification, experience with data analytical software such as Tableau, R, SPSS, etc., experience with multimedia post-production, and then web programs, so HTML or CSS. There's a lot of hard skills in there. Minimum qualifications, bachelor's degree in communication design, IT or related field, associate's degree and combined education/experience can substitute for minimum education. master's degree preferred, 3 years related professional experience preferred. So we could probably even come up with more, but this is a lot of keywords, a lot of things that could be used in your resume and cover letter. Ideally, you want to focus on keywords that come up multiple times in the job posting. I'm pretty sure Adobe comes up a bunch, multimedia comes up a bunch, IT comes up a few times, I think. There's a couple that come up multiple times or are highlighted as very important requirements. So once you go through and make like a broad list of these keywords, what I recommend doing is going through then and honing it down to a list of the most important keywords that you really want to focus on in your resume. And then once you're able to hit those, if you can sprinkle these in as much as you can, super helpful. But I went ahead and created my most important list of keywords based on what I thought from the job posting. And like I said, you can also ask ChatGPT if you would like to use AI support for this. You can, after you've gone through and done this, if you then put it in, I did this just to see how it would look, and it actually gave a lot of great keywords in different categories. So if that's something you're interested in utilizing to help you with this, it can be a great tool for that. So utilizing AI and my own review of the job posting, I came up with this list of the most important keywords. So we have Adobe Creative Cloud, WordPress, HTML, CSS, help desk support, project management, workshop/event coordination, data analytics, IT support and troubleshooting, customer service, communication, curriculum development, and multimedia production and post-production. So once you have these keywords, it's important. It may sound like you're just copy pasting, but when you are working on your cover letter and resume and wanting to utilize these keywords, it is ideal if you can like verbatim use the keywords how they're used in the job posting in your resume. Like if it says multimedia production, you should have multimedia production word for word somewhere in your resume because it is literally going through scanning for those keywords and like scoring you based on how many hits you get on the keywords. So now's not really the time to reword for a way that like best fits your resume. You should be using the keywords exactly how they're written in the job posting because that's what the ATS is looking for. So now we're going to go through. I made a resume for basically if I were to be applying for this job again, how I would write my resume, keeping in mind wanting it to fit the ATS and just generally be a good fit for employers nowadays. So I'm going to kind of just go over briefly, verbally, what my experience is, and then I'm going to show you how I implemented that into my resume. So I decided that I wanted to include 3 past jobs in my resume. My most recent job before this role was as a shift manager at a restaurant. Before that, I was a teaching assistant in the School of Cinematic Arts, where I provided help desk-like support to students in student productions and specifically in the sound production and post-production phases. So I know that that really aligns with this job because I have experience providing help desk-like support in an academic environment. So I know I really want to go heavy in on my experience with that job when applying here. And then before that, I was a development intern at a small production company. And so in that role, I want to talk about the exposure I got to project management. That's going to be a big one for that. So we're going to go into my resume. So this is what it looks like when it's all said and done. You can see that we're focusing on one column as opposed to 2 columns, even though that's really pretty. We're focusing on one column here, and we have clear headings and sections. We have a professional summary, we have an experience section, an education section, skills section, and then optionally projects because I've worked on a few projects that I think are relevant and could boost my application. So, yeah, we're going to go through section by section and talk a little bit about each section of your resume. It's important to note there's a lot of talk about whether your resume can be 2 pages, whether you should try to keep it to 1 page. I would say, general rule of thumb, if you don't have a ton of experience and are applying for entry-level positions, you should be trying to keep your resume to 1 page because chances are you don't have enough for 2 pages. If you have a lot of experience and it's a good solid 2 pages of a resume, that's totally fine. But I would avoid just having like 1 or 2 lines of your resume go onto the next page just because for readability, just aesthetically, it's not great, but it is okay to go more than 1 page if you truly have enough experience that you need to talk about, because you don't want to leave out anything just to make it 1 page. First section is the name and contact info. This one is pretty standard. This will stay consistent when you're changing your resume from job application to job application. So this is a part of your resume that should stay consistent. You want to include your name and then generally your email, your phone number, and your location where you're based. You can also include like your LinkedIn profile or your website, especially depending on what kind of job you're applying to. If it's portfolio based, you want to include links to that. Whatever info is necessary to include in your contact info, you want to make sure that goes in this section here. So on my resume, covered up my info, but I have my name, and then I have my email, and then I have my phone number, and then where I'm based, which is Los Angeles, California. Pretty basic. I'm not applying for anything that requires me to submit a portfolio, and I don't have a website, so I'm not including any of that. Any questions so far for this section? Yeah.
Seeing resumes that put like your exact address.
I don't think that's necessary. I think a lot of resumes that I see nowadays don't include that. And I don't think it's necessary. I think it's more just important to include like the city that you're based in. I think that was more relevant back when there was like physical mail involved with things, but your email kind of accomplishes like the way to contact and send info and documents to you. So I personally wouldn't include your address. The next section is professional summary. So this one should be tailored to specific jobs. Say for me, coming out of college, I studied film and television production. So am a writer director. I wouldn't necessarily want to brand myself as a writer director for this job because that's not what they're hiring. For this job, they're looking for a multimedia support specialist. That's what they're looking for. So that's what you really want to brand yourself as in your professional summary. Say you're a PR major and you're applying to a PR firm, you want to tailor your entire resume to that specific role that they're asking you for. But say you're also applying for a more broad communications job somewhere else that has a different title than that previous job. You then want to go back and rework your professional summary to brand yourself as that kind of employee because they don't really care about what you've done, like what your role has been in the past. They want to know that you can do the role that they're looking for. So you really want to tailor this to specific jobs. And this is an excellent chance to add some of these keywords in right off the bat to make sure that you are someone who is aligned with the job posting. So, a little bit of what that looks like. This is my professional summary. So I said multimedia support specialist with extensive Adobe Creative Cloud experience, eager to contribute to team success through hard work, attention to detail, and excellent problem-solving skills. Clear understanding of administrative duties with experience in providing IT support in an academic environment. So I'm hitting some of the keywords in this that we talked about before. Multimedia support specialist. That's what they're looking for. So that's what we want to make sure we're branding ourselves as. Adobe Creative Cloud. And I know from experience doing the job myself, but even if I didn't, I know that this is a huge part of the job. They want someone who knows Adobe Creative Cloud. So right off the bat, I'm getting in there and I'm saying, I know how to use Adobe Creative Cloud. And then I'm talking about some of those soft skills here as well. Hard work, attention to detail, problem solving skills. They mention administrative duties in the job posting. So I'm saying that I've done that before. I know how to do that. And then we're specifically hitting IT support in an academic environment because that was something that was also listed in the job posting. Any questions? Mhm.
Was this section necessary? Because I saw like Marco templates
Mhm.
and they don't have this section. Is it different across industries?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I have also seen a lot of resumes that don't have this section. I personally think it's a great chance to include some of those keywords that you can't fit anywhere else in your resume. So while I don't think it would disqualify you to not have this section, I've seen plenty that don't. I think it's personally useful because it's your chance, especially if you aren't submitting a cover letter. You should be submitting a cover letter, but if you're not, this is your chance to sort of hit on some points that you don't touch on anywhere else in your resume. So while I wouldn't say it's necessary, especially depending on the job, I think it's definitely useful and it doesn't hurt to include it. Getting into what I think is the most important section of your resume is the experience section. So you want to use strong action words here. You want to include quantifiable metrics. So instead of saying, I helped students, as you'll see in my section, I will say, I helped X amount of students, or I helped students across X amount of student productions. You want to give them quantifiable metrics to show that your work in the past has made a direct contribution, like that you can quantify to the different companies that you worked for. So doing that in and of itself is going to boost your resume a lot. And you want to make sure your best accomplishments and most relevant responsibilities are listed in your first bullet point because, like we talked about earlier, how recruiters are scanning your resume, they're doing that F pattern. So when they're going down and they see one of your roles, chances are they're going to look at the first bullet point. They're going to see what you've listed as your first bullet point, and if it catches their attention, they'll keep reading. But if it doesn't catch their attention, there's less of a chance that they'll keep reading and go further into your resume. And again, you want to use these keywords whenever you're applying to the jobs and you're in this experience section. It's your chance to show them that you have done the things that they're asking you to do in this role. Here's what I have for mine. So, first up, I have my most recent position before I started this job. So, you want to include your role, which was for me shift manager. You want to include the company, which was a restaurant called Hey Sunshine Kitchen. You want to include where that company was, which is Los Angeles. And then you want to include the dates that you worked there, including both month and year for specificity. And then you get into the bullet points. So I want to highlight at this restaurant, we really prioritize customer service and work towards a 5-star Yelp rating, which is pretty rare at restaurants. And so that's something that I directly helped the restaurant achieve. So I want to highlight it here. So I led a team to provide exceptional customer service, resulting in a 5-star Yelp rating. Here, we've let our first bullet point be impressive, eye-catching, and we use those quantifiable metrics in order to make it stand out even more. I follow that up by saying delivered high volume customer support, resolving issues efficiently in a fast-paced environment. I want to highlight the fact that if you've worked in food service, you know it can be a very fast-paced environment. I'm able to problem solve and deliver customer support in that fast-paced environment, and then address various issues in a calm and timely manner to maintain a seamless workflow. Workflow is a word that pops up a lot in the application, so I want to make sure I use that. And customer service is one as well. So with this job, ultimately what I'm really trying to highlight is my problem solving skills and my customer service skills. So that's what I'm focusing on in the first one there. Then I go into my past job as a teaching assistant, and this is where I have the most relevant experience for the job. So I included the most information here and really tried to beef up this section of it. For my first bullet point, provided technical and software support for 18 plus student productions per semester. Again, we're hitting that quantifiable metric, saying that I managed 18 plus student productions. What it's also doing here is saying that I've experienced providing technical and software support, something that this job is asking for. And I'm mentioning just by virtue of listing this role, I have experience in an academic environment. And not only that, I have it at the university that I'm applying for the job for. So those things are all going to be green flags for the recruiter and ATS systems. Now, I wanted to make sure that I specifically use the keyword help desk because it's mentioned a lot in the resume. And so I wanted to try to incorporate it here. And so I say managed a virtual help desk, delivering hands-on training and guidance on post-production workflows. So I hit one of those main keywords here, and I hit also hands-on training, and I hit post-production workflows, all of which are mentioned in the job posting. And then in my next bullet point, I want to touch on event coordination and coordination with faculty and external speakers. So I say coordinated events, guest lectures, and classroom activities with faculty and external speakers. So it touches on that event coordination. And then troubleshoot technical issues in fast-paced production environments. We're hitting production, troubleshooting, technical issues, all things using the language that's used in the job posting. So in this teaching assistant role, I'm really trying to hit hard on I have experience in a help desk-like environment providing technical support for these students in this thesis class and also event coordination. So I'm hitting a lot of key words in this one. And then my role as a development intern reviewed 50 plus submitted scripts for consideration, again, giving that quantifiable metric, and then attended team meetings to assist with project management and coordination of current slate. So again, hitting that keyword of project management, things that are important for this role. So altogether, my goal with this was to provide a comprehensive overview of the roles, how the roles I've had in the past, had responsibilities that directly align with the job that I'm applying for. Does anybody have any questions regarding this section? Another important thing to note, these aren't all the jobs I've had in my entire life. I had jobs in high school, but I personally don't think it's necessary to include my hostess job at an Italian restaurant when I was 16 years old. This is your chance to highlight your professional experience that directly correlates to the job you're applying for. Obviously, if you only have experience from like high school jobs and summer college jobs, you want to include those, but you want to make sure that everything you're including in your experience section directly helps you applying for this job. So while I might not include that hostess position or the bartending gig I had over summers during college, if I were applying to another restaurant, those are positions that I would include because that would help bolster my resume in a food service setting. So that's another example of how you really want to tailor your resume depending on the job because those are just positions that aren't necessarily relevant to the job that I'm applying for now. Okay. Next section is education. Much like name and contact info, this is probably going to stay the same as you're changing your resume for position to position. You don't want to include your high school unless it's the highest level of education. If you have completed college and you're a graduate, you can just go ahead and give your details for your undergraduate experience if that's your highest level of education. If your highest level of education is a master's degree, you might still want to include undergraduate because that's relevant. It shows how much schooling you've been through, but you're not going to want to include high school. if you're currently in college and you're currently an undergrad and you're applying to internships, things like that, chances are you will keep your high school education on there because it's more recent and relevant and it's your highest level of education. But for me, because I am a college graduate, I included my BFA in film and television production. We're going to include where you got it from, so the University of Southern California, the dates that you were in school, including the months. And then if you have a good GPA, you think that's going to help you out, you can include your GPA as well. This may also be a section that you can um, touch on any specific honors or achievements you accrued during your time in school. So you can include that here if you want. But for me, I just wanted to basically include my BFA. So that's all I included here. Any questions about that?
Do you think we should include the school that we like got our?
Like the specific school? You can for sure. I didn't just because it was already so wordy and it's kind of, I think, you know, it depends because yes, the School of Cinematic Arts is very prestigious, and so that can, bolster it in some ways. But in my mind, I just chose to include the university because I feel like people still associate that degree with USC. So you can include that for sure. I just chose not to. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Like for culture.
I would say if it's relevant to the job you're applying for, it would be better served in the last section I'm going to go over. So I'll make sure to mention that when I get to this last section because you want to try to keep the education section clean. So the things you might want to include there are maybe like if you graduated with certain honors or something like that. But you could also include that in the last section. So it's really kind of up to you. But I get a little bit more into that into the section after this. So I'll be sure to bring that up. Next section is skills. So there's competing ideologies on exactly what kind of skills you should be putting in here. I believe that it's most important to include, like, focus on your hard skills that aren't mentioned anywhere else or only lightly mentioned elsewhere in your resume. It's best if you can integrate your soft skills into the rest of your resume. So if you want to talk about your communication skills, instead of putting communication under the skills section of your resume, if you can integrate that into your resume to say facilitated communication, et cetera, et cetera, if you can use it within the bullet points of your experience, I think that that's a lot stronger than just saying, I know how to communicate, because including it in your bullet points shows how you've used those skills. So I personally like to focus on those hard skills. And again, you want to tailor these skills to keywords and job posting. We all have a lot of skills. I have plenty of film and skills related to film and television production. We could even go so far as to talk about just general skills that you have, but you want to make sure the ones you're including are only the ones that are important to the job. For me, screenwriting isn't relevant to this job, so I'm not going to include it, even though it's a really strong skill that I have. So for my resume, I decided to call this section technical skills because I know this job requires knowledge of a lot of softwares, and I want to make sure I hit on the ones that I do have experience in. So I chose Adobe Creative Cloud, WordPress, Microsoft Office, Google Drive, and then HTML and CSS. Automatically, those are in the job posting. The ATS is going to see those and like that. So just having those in there in the skills section is already going to boost your resume. What's really important is you don't want to lie in this section. I know it's easy to see a job posting and see certain requirements, but you don't necessarily fit them. Ultimately, I think it's better to focus on your strengths, the things that you're actually good at, because it's just gonna not help yourself down the line if you aren't truthful about what you're actually skilled in. So, as you'll notice, I don't include data analytics or Jira or like Tableau or SPSS because I didn't have any experience in those going into this job. So, I don't want to set expectations that I can't meet. I'm not going to include those because that's not truthful. What I'm instead going to focus on are the things that I do have experience in. So I do have Adobe Creative Cloud experience. I have used WordPress before. I've used Microsoft Office, Google Drive, and HTML and CSS. And HTML and CSS was one of those bonus skills that was listed in the job posting. So while those aren't required, if you do have any of those bonus skills and requirements, you want to make sure 100% that you're including them on your resume because if that's just going to give you like bonus points. There are other ways you can do this. I've seen other resumes where people have their skills section and then they divide it up into certain types of skills. So they might have generally they have skills and then they'll have softwares and then they'll have soft skills. Like they kind of break it up depending, like based on the category of skill. That's totally acceptable. A lot of people do that, but I personally, this is just how I approached it. The next section, I've loosely titled projects. There's a bunch of different things you could call this section. It's also optional because if you don't have any projects or special achievements that you want to note, you obviously don't want to include this section because the section would just be blank. But this is where those clubs and activities could maybe come into play. Any projects that you've worked on, especially if you're applying for a job where they ask for your portfolio, you may want to touch on some important projects you've worked on in the past. If you're applying for a PR job and you've done a really cool campaign, you might want to highlight this here. You can call it a bunch of different things, achievements, projects, etc., but you really only want to focus on those relevant achievements and projects. And it can be used to highlight accomplishments that aren't listed anywhere else on your resume that would boost your application, make you a more desirable candidate. So, because I have a creative background and that's where a lot of my projects and achievements have come, that's what I'm touching on in my resume, but in a way that is desirable for this job. So, most recently, I wrote and directed a short film. And so the way I described this was that I led end-to-end project management of a $30,000 film production and coordinated teams through pre-production, production, and post-production. So, project management, that's a keyword from our job posting. Production and post-production, those are also keywords from the job posting. And coordinating teams, that is loosely mentioned throughout the job posting. So, that's what I focus on for that project. Really is trying to highlight my project management skills. And then when I was in high school, although, like I said, you typically don't want to highlight like your high school education, things like that. This was a huge undertaking that I had in high school. And although it was in high school, it's still relevant to this job. And so I want to make sure I highlight it. So I wrote exercised event coordination and management skills to write, direct, and produce 5 original musicals and donate a total of $68,000 in proceeds to the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So with this one, it's sort of similar to the first, where it's project management, but this one is more focused on event coordination and management. So in this section, I'm really trying to hammer in event and project management and coordination because I felt like elsewhere in my resume, that was not touched on as intensively. So I wanted to focus on that for these projects, and that's why I included them in my resume. Here, like we were talking about for different clubs, I would include the clubs primarily if you contributed in a meaningful way, in a quantifiable way, like we were talking about before. Like if you led X amount of team meetings for a club as the president, that would be something you definitely want to include in your resume. Just being a participant in the club may or may not be relevant, but if it's, say, a PR club and you're applying for a PR job, sure, you would want to include that even if you don't have any specific quantifiable accomplishments within that club. But it's a pretty loose section. It's just your chance to brag about yourself in other ways that you don't get to in the other sections of your resume, as long as they are relevant to the job posting. You may or may not be using a cover letter depending on the job that you're applying to, but I always say that even if they don't ask for one, you should be writing a cover letter because all it's going to do is help you. It's never going to hurt you. And so the cover letter is a chance to include even more of those keywords and sell yourself even more. So if you have the option, I always say you should do it. So, like I said, this is your chance to use those keywords, but you also want to fill the gaps in your resume and sell yourself in your own words. Resumes are very formulaic. You don't even include full sentences a lot of the time. So your cover letter is your way to speak in your own words while maintaining professionalism and sell yourself in a way that you can't really do with the resume because you're limited to that formula. So you want to keep it short and succinct, usually between 3 and 4 paragraphs. You never want to go over a page with the cover letter. Trust me, it's not going to get read if it's more than a page. And you want to avoid repeating info that's in your resume. This can get tricky because you want to touch on your experience and talk about the things that are in your resume, but you want to try to find a way to talk about it in a fresh way that feels different from how it's mentioned in your resume. With a cover letter, the general structure is your first paragraph is your chance to introduce yourself and express a genuine interest in the position. Tell the hiring manager why this role excites you, and you want to mention if someone has referred you, because that can help in this part. Paragraphs 2 to 3, so the body of your cover letter should be between 1 and 2 paragraphs long, and this should go into your qualifications and specific examples. You want to avoid repeating info from your resume, like I said. Your final paragraph should wrap up your cover letter with a summary or final statement of your interests and qualifications. Thank the hiring manager for their time and consideration. This is generally the structure you want to adhere to when you're writing your cover letters. While you're changing your resumes from job to job, the cover letter gets massively changed from job to job because you have to think of how to put things in your own words and write it in a letter format. So the cover letter tends to take more time and more effort than the resume, but it is worth it. But despite that, because it has this structure, you can sort of set a template for yourself of how you want to introduce yourself and express interest, and then kind of how your summary at the end will go. Usually it's paragraphs 2 to 3 that you're doing the most editing from application to application for, but this is the general structure that you want to hit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to look at a cover letter that I wrote for this job, and we're going to break it down paragraph by paragraph to see how I structured it. So this is my cover letter for this job. I included my name and my contact info at the top, and then I included the name of the person I'm writing the letter to. That's another important point with the cover letter. If you can find a specific person to address this to, you always should do that. That may require some digging and researching, but it's really worth it as opposed to addressing your cover letter to the hiring manager. Dear hiring manager. Of course, if you can't find who that person is, that is acceptable. But if you can find the name of the person that will be reading your application, that's going to set you apart. So, applying for this job, I knew that I was applying to the Digital Lounge manager, our manager, Sean, who you may have taken a workshop with in the past. So that's who I'm addressing this letter to. And went ahead, gave all that contact info and who I'm addressing it to. And then I'm just going to read the cover letter from start to finish. Dear Mr. Olson, I am excited to apply for the Digital Lounge coordinator position at USC Annenberg, where I can bring my experiences in technical support, help desk services, and multimedia training in an academic environment. As a student at USC School of Cinematic Arts, I worked as a teaching assistant, liaising between 75 plus students and faculty each semester and providing help desk style technical support for students student and faculty questions and issues. My ability to bridge the gap between conceptual material and technical application makes me a great fit for this job. Upon graduating from USC in 2023, I led a team as a shift manager at Hey Sunshine Kitchen. In this role, I delivered high-volume customer support, managed team workflows, and resolved issues quickly in a fast-paced environment. I have been using Adobe Creative Cloud since I was 14 years old and have honed my skills in various personal and academic projects since. I'm particularly experienced in Premiere Pro, Photoshop, Audition, and After Effects, but I can confidently provide support in all Adobe programs. Supporting students and helping them navigate technical challenges has been a consistent focus across my roles, and I am motivated to continue that work within the Digital Lounge. As a USC alum, I am especially excited by the prospect of helping the next generation of Trojans in their pursuit of a higher education and giving back to a university that has given so much to me. Given the opportunity to permanently join the Digital Lounge team, I will prioritize going above and beyond to help our students and ensure smooth and efficient execution of all Digital Lounge operations. I appreciate your consideration and look forward to hearing from you. Fight on. Best, Michaela Davik. So now we'll go in paragraph by paragraph, taking a look at the cover letter. For the intro paragraph, our first paragraph, you want to keep it brief but engaged and mention why you're excited for this role and why you would be a good fit. So I'm expressing my interest and excitement at applying for this position, and I'm briefly mentioning my experience. I have experience in technical support, help desk services, and multimedia training. Those are what I identified as three of the key things that they're looking for in this job. So right off the bat, that's what I'm mentioning in my first paragraph. In my second paragraph and third paragraph, I get a little more into the meat of my experience. A lot of this stuff is mentioned in other words in my resume, but I'm trying to tell more of a story here and bring up why I would be a good fit in my own words. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm talking specifically about my job as a teaching assistant and my shift manager role at the restaurant, and using some of those additional keywords to bridge the gap between my resume. And using quantifiable metrics here, that is also always welcome and encouraged in your cover letters. So I'm using a different metric. Instead of saying I helped with 18 student productions per semester, I'm saying that I assisted 75 plus students and faculty each semester with in-depth help desk style support. And I'm repeating some of the keywords that I've identified as the most important keywords here, because the ATS, if it sees that you've used keywords multiple times, that's going to help your application rank higher. So certain important keywords, if you use them twice, you're going to be golden. You don't want to use them too often, but a few times in your resume will help you rank higher. And then I mentioned a Creative Cloud in my resume, but I decided I wanted to go into it a little bit more here, saying that I have over 10 years of experience with Adobe Creative Cloud and that I've been using it consistently in the time since. And I wanted to specifically mention the ones that I am specifically qualified in, but that I am confident in all of Adobe Creative Cloud. So this is just getting a little bit into more of the meat of why I would be a good fit for this job. And then at the end, I kind of sum it all up and bring in my connection as a USC alum, because that is a strong point that I want to make, that is mentioned but not really focused on as much in my resume. So I really want to make a point to talk about the fact that I'm a USC alumni. I kind of am bridging the gap between my jobs in this part because I know that I kind of have a mixed bag of jobs in my past. Shift manager at a restaurant, teaching assistant, and development intern are pretty different roles in and of themselves, but what I wanted to do was identify something that was consistent across all those roles that is important in the job I'm applying for as well. So helping people is something that has been consistent in all my jobs. At the restaurant, you're helping customers. As a TA, I was helping students. And as a development intern, I was directly supporting the company that I was working for and the people who work there, in addition to people who were submitting projects to the company. So I wanted to make that as my through line to finish off my cover letter. And then I mentioned the fact that I'm a USC alum and that it would be an honor to help the next generation of Trojans and give back. And just finishing off saying that I will prioritize going above and beyond and ensure smooth and efficient execution of all Digital Lounge operations. And then thank them for their consideration. And I threw in a little fight on because I was applying to USC. So I wanted to show that I understand the culture, I know USC, and that's how I ended it. Does anybody have any questions regarding that?
Using AI at all to write this, or you just have a set template that you use and just keep changing it according to the job description?
So that's actually my next point. So that's a perfect segue. So utilizing AI to check your work. I did use ChatGPT just in order to basically, my rule of thumb is I think that especially the things that you're writing, your cover letter and your resume should come from you, should be in your own voice. But I do think that AI is there to be a tool to help make sure you're hitting all the marks that are going to help your application be as successful as you want it to be. So the way I think AI is best used in this workflow is writing your resume yourself, writing your cover letter yourself. Within those, like what you mentioned, like having a template for the cover letter, I generally have a loose template, but it's more just knowing the structure and like how I usually have a similar intro and conclusion that I tweak for the job, and then I know that the middle is going to be changed a lot, but so I go through that, use that as sort of a loose template, write it all out, write the whole resume out. And then what I think is useful is if you can get the job description and job posting, if you can take that and then you can take your resume and cover letter and you can input them both into ChatGPT and say, this is my resume and cover letter for this specific job posting. And then you can ask it questions. Am I hitting the major keywords? Is this ATS friendly? Things like that. And then based on what it tells you there, you can then use that to tweak your resume, tweak your cover letter. So I did that for mine. I threw it all into ChatGPT, and it was telling me that there were certain keywords that I was missing, specifically using the word help desk because it's mentioned a bunch of times in the job posting. I didn't specifically say the word help desk, even though I implied that I provided technical support, did help desk like work. It was saying if you just use the word help desk, that's going to help you rank higher in ATS. So that was a change I made. And it can also help you if maybe your language is a little too passive. It can give you tips on how to strengthen your language, make it a little more active. So those are the ways that I used it when making mine, and I think are great. Sure, you can use it in whatever way you would like in order to curate your cover letter and resume, but my rule of thumb with AI is that we should be using it as a tool, not a system for generation itself. So I think that using it to check your work after the fact ensures that you've done the work to understand the job posting, to understand how to tailor your application to fit that, and then just using it to check your work is how I like to go about it.